See, this is the strangest experience to have y'all here and people on the computer, and then know that there are people in the parish hall too. It's an odd experience after having an empty church for a couple months now. So normally on this annual meeting Sunday, you would hear a sermon that's more like a review of the year that we've had. But after the year that we have just been through, I'm not sure that any sermon could do it justice. So I'm not even going to try on that score. I could tell you that it's because the year has just been too much and full of too much, and that would be partially true. But the other truth is that we have been in the middle of telling the story of the Bible, start to finish, Genesis to Revelation. And the real truth is that I don't want to stop. I have really enjoyed our journey through the Bible, and I think that we have come together as a community around it and found a lot of strength and hope for our journey as we've been telling these stories. And I don't want to lose even one Sunday of that project that we're on. This Sunday in particular, we are in the heart of Jesus's ministry and his life and his redeeming work. And I don't want us to lose sight of that. There is so much that we could be talking about on this Sunday. There's so many stories that we could be telling. If you're reading along in the path, you know that this chapter has a lot of meat to it. There's a lot of stories in it, and it was hard to narrow it down and figure out what is it that we were going to talk about and think about in this sermon today, because there's really no way to sum it up in just one story. But with that caveat, if we had to pick just one story, this story today about the paralyzed man and his four friends is a really, really rich one. It has much to teach us about Jesus. It has much to teach us about our own life of faith. And I think it also maybe has a little something to tell us about this year that we've just been through, and a little something to tell us about the direction that we might be headed in the year to come. So first, I want you to picture the scene for just a minute. Jesus is still at the very beginning of his ministry, but already word has spread about his healing powers. Wherever he goes, there is a crowd, a thick crowd gathered around him. And you have to remember that this is the first century, so there are no doctor's offices, there's no hospital. Whenever a healer came to town, and there were healers everywhere, Jesus is not alone in having the skill of healing. Wherever a healer showed up, a crowd would gather, because this was such a needed thing during that time. It was an opportunity not to be missed. So this explains the crowd that started following Jesus wherever he goes, reaching out towards him, begging him to help them, help their relatives. And Jesus wants to help him, but you get the feeling in this passage that he needs some crowd control going on here, right? Which is why he goes inside what's probably Peter's house, which has become his home base in Capernaum, to try to find a way to manage the crowd. And this is what presents a dilemma for those four friends who have their paralyzed friend with them. They're trying to find their way through the crowd with this stretcher. And it's just become that much more difficult as Jesus has moved inside a house. How are they to get the stretcher through the crowd? How are they even to get Jesus's attention now that he's gone inside? What they do next demonstrates not only their persistence, but also their creativity and their willingness to do what we would say is thinking outside the box. It also, I think, reveals no small amount of courage on the part of their friend who is lying there paralyzed on a mat. This group of friends climb up onto the roof, which would have been a thatched roof. It would have been thatched with mud and sticks and reeds. And they essentially begin to dig through the roof. They start to dig it up. The translation of this is they literally unroof the roof. They unmake the roof. This required teamwork, it required ingenuity, but more than that, it required a tremendous amount of trust on the part of this man who is lying there paralyzed on a mat, way up on top of the roof, getting ready to be lowered down there onto the floor of this house. I picture this almost like if you've seen those helicopter rescues at sea, where you've got a helicopter kind of hovering above the water, rescuing someone who might be dangling by a rope on a board. I picture the paralyzed man like that, dangling completely at the mercy of his friends as they lower him down to the ground. So this would have taken a lot of trust. I need my notes. Their persistence and his bravery pay off, though. And in the process, we learned that Jesus is no ordinary healer at all. He's not just someone who has come to town to heal bodies, but he has also come to town to heal souls. Jesus knows that true healing is always holistic, that our spiritual and physical and cognitive and emotional selves are integrated. And this is not to say that illness is all in our minds or that sin causes disability, although certainly people would have thought that in the first century. But it is to say that true healing requires attention to all these different parts of ourselves. Jesus is not offering just some quick fix for illness. He is offering a deeper healing that addresses the separation that people feel between themselves and God and between themselves and their communities. This is really good news for people who need healing. It was good news for that man on the mat who left not only walking, but also reconciled to God. But this puts Jesus on somewhat shaky ground. So we're so used to hearing this language about Jesus forgiving sins that it can just kind of sail right past us. But during the time that Jesus was living, other observant Jews would have heard that language about Jesus forgiving sins. They would have heard it as blasphemy, as Jesus usurping a role that belongs only to God. And so this story gives us hints about the trouble that is to come, the attention that Jesus has been stirring up, of his mission not just to heal, but to reconcile, and also the split between those who recognize his identity as the Son of God and those who see him as violating some of the very central tenets of Jewish law. So that's where our story is about to go. But as always, with these stories, I can't help but think about how God is speaking to us through this right now, right in the middle of our lives. And in this story, I hear so many messages about what we have just been through and also where we might be heading as a church. First, I can't help but think about the many obstacles that we have faced this year, obstacles not unlike that group of friends trying to reach Jesus. I've been thinking about the persistence and the creativity that it has taken to keep our church community connected in the middle of a pandemic. We have had a team of folks at our church who have done the equivalent of unroofing the roof, who have been digging through the roof, or in our case, installing cables and cameras and other things so that we could find new ways to meet Jesus. We have had people who have been thinking outside the box and digging and working and using their ingenuity to keep us connected. I've also thought about the courage of those who a year ago would have thought there was no way they could ever participate in a Zoom meeting like they're doing right now. It takes a lot of courage to be willing to try something new, especially when it comes to something like church that we're so used to doing in a traditional way. And yet here we are as a community finding new ways to be together and using our creativity to stay connected. Second, this story has reminded me that in our day, no less than in the first century, we are surrounded by people who need healing. There's the coronavirus for sure. That's made us aware of sickness and illness in the world. But this year has also revealed other kinds of pain and loss that go on all around us all the time. I've said before that this pandemic has been stressful in different ways for different people. And what I mean by that is that the stress that families and working parents have felt is different than the stress of people who are living alone, but it's all been stressful. There is no Olympics when it comes to stress and suffering. I believe that we will be recovering from this year for a while, and that there are undercurrents of grief and anger that won't go away even as the virus begins to die down. And I believe that our church has an incredibly important role to play in how we heal from everything that we're going through. And our church has an incredibly important role to play in the life of our community and helping to foster healing. So even as we physically recover, we know that Jesus offers something more than just the healing of our bodies. Jesus is offering us a deeper healing, a healing for all the loss and grief that we've experienced, healing for the disconnection and the separation that we've been through, and healing for all the ways that the past year may have wounded us. It is together, joined as the body of Christ, that we can participate in the ways that God is working for reconciliation and healing in our world. And I believe that the witness of our church is more essential than ever. Finally, and ultimately, I believe that once we encounter Jesus, we are transformed. Notice that the paralyzed man doesn't go out of that house the same way that he came in. He doesn't get lifted back up through the roof. In a similar way, this year and our experience of walking with God and our community has changed us. We will not leave this experience the same way we came in either. The work of figuring out how we've been changed and what it means for us as a community is going to be ongoing. It's going to require some work. But encountering Jesus is transformational. It should change us. That's why these stories matter so much. They're records of the transformational love of God, not just for people in another time and place, not just for the first witnesses of Jesus, but for us here and now. I can't wait to see how God is going to work through our community this year. We will need to continue to be creative and innovative. I have no doubt we will need to continue to get up on roofs and start digging. But in the midst of us, God is working, healing and reconciling and transforming us. Amen.